Bill says. I'm very proud to stand here today once again in support of Bill C-18, an act to amend the Rouge National Urban Park Act, Canada National Parks Act, Parks Canada Agency Act, and the Rouge National Urban Park Act. I want to thank my colleagues for their interventions this afternoon and certainly in the previous occasions of the House, as well as the hard work of the committee that's brought this forward to us in such a short period of time. I will focus my discussion today primarily on the Rouge National Urban Park, as it is very relevant to the riding that I represent, the riding of Scarborough Rouge Park. So for obvious reasons, I will limit my intervention to the Rouge Park. Parks Canada has had decades of experience in applying ecological integrity in a variety of protected areas, each with its own unique needs and set of circumstances. In considering the addition of ecological integrity to the Rouge National Urban Park, I'm confident that Parks Canada can and will bring the experience to bear in the Rouge, while respecting the park's urban setting and its reasons for establishment. Allow me to begin by quoting the amendment proposed for Section 2 of the Rouge National Urban Park Act. Ecological integrity means, with respect to the park, a condition that is determined to be characteristic of its natural region and likely to persist, including abiotic components and the composition and abundance of native species and biological communities, rates of change and supporting processes. As this definition makes clear, ecological integrity involves a holistic and comprehensive view. By viewing ecological integrity as a continuum and adopting a similar approach as that taken by its partners in the Greater Toronto Area, Parks Canada will be able to apply ecological integrity across the park's diverse landscapes to achieve the best ecological outcomes possible, while at the same time ensuring an integrated approach to the conservation of nature, culture, and agriculture. Essentially, Bill C-18 would require Parks Canada to manage Rouge National Urban Park in a way that appropriately considers living things, the urban park's flora and fauna, along with the inanimate things like land and water. In addition, its management would also have to consider the dynamics of ecosystems, how they change, and what drives their evolution. Placing the first priority on ecological integrity in this way is not new. Of course, Parks Canada is already required by law to place the first priority on ecological integrity, the management of traditional national parks. Rouge National Urban Park, however, represents an entirely new concept for Canada to create, protect, and present natural, cultural, and agricultural heritage in a park that lies next to Canada's largest city and metropolitan area. Incidentally, the park is accessible to 7 million people within a 1-hour driving distance. And as indicated by our minister, it's also accessible by public transport. Rouge National Urban Park represents a bold step forward for Canada. To get a better sense of this, one need only look back at the history of protected areas in this country. In 1885, the Government of Canada demonstrated great vision by creating and protecting our country's first national park, today known as Banff National Park. The decision to create one of the world's first national parks was a bold and progressive move by a young country. The idea that elements of our natural and cultural heritage are inherently valuable and worthy of protection for future generations remains just as powerful today, especially as we celebrate our 150th birthday. Just as significant, however, was Canada's decision to make national parks accessible for all Canadians and not just a privileged few. This policy remains relevant today, albeit challenging because of the inherent challenge in preserving elements of a dynamic ecosystem while making those elements accessible to visitors. In 1911, Canada created an organization originally known as the Dominion Parks Branch, now the Parks Agency of Canada, to handle this work and to develop the expertise needed to do it well. Over the years, Canada created more national parks and developed world-leading expertise in how to plan, manage, and program them. Today, Parks Canada actively promotes wildlife in places that attract hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. This work requires innovation, scientific research, and a great deal of fieldwork. It also requires making tough decisions, managing the relationships between species, and deciding when to intervene and when not to intervene in balance. It's a balancing act. Another important milestone that informs the creation and management of Rouge National Urban Park was the establishment of the National Historic Sites Program more than a century ago. With this program, Canada began to protect and present elements of our history. At the time, it was also seen as a bold step forward. Today, Parks Canada manages 171 national historic sites, such as former forts, towns, and fur trading posts. By preserving and presenting elements of our history, Parks Canada helps Canadians and visitors to this country appreciate our rich and unique heritage. Canada's decision to establish a national marine conservation areas in 1987 further enabled the protection and promotion of Canada's natural and cultural heritage, and was another bold decision that demonstrated international conservation vision and leadership. Over time, ecological values have increasingly merged with heritage values. This is particularly true with Rouge National Urban Park, a place that includes some of the oldest Indigenous sites in Canada, along with first-class agricultural land that has been farmed continuously for centuries. It is also home to rare Carolinian forest, wetlands, and meadows that provide habitat to over 1,700 species of plants and animals, some of them at risk of extinction. With each new milestone, Parks Canada has taken on greater responsibility and acquired new levels of expertise and experience. It was forged valuable partnerships with external organizations, including Indigenous partners, community groups, volunteers, and local residents. One of the strongest examples of successful partnership is the Guayhanas National Marine Conservation Area Reserve and Haida Heritage Site, located on the very edge of the Pacific continental shelf on Canada's west coast. The lands and waters of the Guayhanas have long been celebrated for their stunning beauty and remarkable biodiversity. From its temperate rainforest to the surrounding marine waters, the archipelago is a place of great cultural and ecological significance, and a sacred place where the land, sea, and people have always been inseparable. In 2010, the Guayhanas became the first site in the world protected from mountain summit to deep ocean floor. The Archipelago Management Board, with representatives of the Council of the Haida Nation and the Government of Canada, managed the site cooperatively. When Guayhanas was established, Guajav, president of the Haida Nation, described it this way, and I quote, "This is a changing of the tides. As we come to appreciate the fragile and precious nature of our marine areas, we will begin to give the necessary attention to look after and restore our oceans." Madam Speaker, the historical context I have described is crucial in making a reasoned decision about Bill C-18. The management of national parks, national historic sites, and national marine conservation areas continue to evolve, and yet a management approach based on ecological integrity continues to be in the best interest of Canadians and our collective heritage. Parks Canada is a world leader in applying this approach. A few years ago, the World Wildlife Fund International awarded Parks Canada a gift to the earth, the organization's top accolade for conservation work of outstanding global merit. The award recognizes inspiring leadership and conservation achievement that contributes to protecting the living planet. Bill C-18 would give Parks Canada the authority to follow the same management approach that it uses in traditional national parks in Rouge National Urban Park to make them accessible and memorable for visitors while protecting their integrity. Management decision-making will take ecological integrity as the first priority, while also considering the reason for the park's establishment. The authority is granted under the Act and support for the park's objectives. To describe it another way, ecological integrity is the goal of Parks Canada. Managing visitor experience, educational programming, and ecosystems is a process used to get there. Canada remains at the forefront of efforts to conserve elements of its heritage, flora, fauna, and landscapes. Placing the first priority on ecological integrity in the management of the Rouge National Urban Park will ensure that this country furthers its international leadership in conservation. Working in collaboration with environmental groups, farmers, Indigenous people, and other stakeholders, I'm confident that Parks Canada will work to achieve ecological gains and conserve cultural and agricultural resources throughout the park. Madam Speaker, I want to take a few minutes to really thank and acknowledge the number of different people and individuals and organizations that have really helped us to get to this point today. And I want to really start with the many levels of government and leaders from different governments for their great work, including our Minister of Environment and Climate Change, as well as the provincial ministers who have been involved in this, including the Honourable Brad Dogood. I want to start by also acknowledging Lois James, who is long considered to be the mother of the Rouge, who for over 50 years has worked to advocate for this vision. And in 2003, she was acknowledged with the Order of Canada for her great service to this country. The Rouge remains a life work of many different individuals, and I'll be remiss if I don't acknowledge the work of the Friends of the Rouge, who were mentioned earlier by my colleagues, including Jim Robb, Kevin O'Connor, and Gloria Resner, for their continued advocacy on this, including advocacy as late as half an hour ago. So I do really appreciate their interventions and their continuous work on this. Certainly CPAWS and Janice Sumner, who's taken great leadership in bringing this together, along with her other environmental colleagues. I think it's quite important for them to get together and be part of coming up with the amendment, as well as the farmers who for over 200 years have farmed the areas. There are a number of family farms that have existed in the area for over 2 centuries, and really they've played a very important role in coming to the table and coming to consensus on Bill C-18. Many local organizations have a vested stake in this, including the West Rouge Community Organization, the Centennial Community and Recreational Association, and the Highland Creek Community Association, who are all part of my riding, but also who've been impacted by the Rouge Park. There are a number of other organizations that precede me, including Save the Rouge Coalition, that I think 30 years ago basically set up and started their great work in achieving this dream. I know my honourable friend, just the previous speaker, spoke about how he can get a little park in his community of Hamilton into a national park by a tick mark, and unfortunately it's not that simple. It is because all of these people have worked so hard under tremendous odds to get to this point. I mean, just to put it in perspective, the land we're talking about in terms of the provincial land alone is about 25 square kilometers. Once completed, the entire park is about 79 square kilometers. The cost of a bungalow in parts of this riding are in excess of $1 million. So if you look at the enormous pushback from developers and from other interested parties in stopping this over the last 3 decades was immense, and these people withstood it. So I'm really gratified and humbled by the great work that they've done over this time. Of course, my good friend and colleague, the member for Scarborough-Guildwood, who used to represent parts of the park, but who's a great advocate on this. I really wish to acknowledge him, and our Minister of Environment and Climate Change once again, and her team, who have worked so hard in such a short period of time to make sure that this becomes a Canada 150 gift for the people of Scarborough and for the people of Toronto and for the people of Canada. So I want to really thank her and her team for this enormous work. Finally, to all my colleagues here who have spoken and who continue to express concerns, but also express support for this, I want to thank you. This really should be a cross-party line issue where we are creating we are solidifying a vision of the community that's come together for the last 30, 40 years in a way that we're preserving for future generations. And I think we will look back on it in a number of years with great pride to see what a great Canada 150 gift we've given to our country. With that, Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Algonquin people and to thank you and all my colleagues for their efforts this afternoon. Thank you.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for his speech. It must be great to have such a wonderful park in his riding. And I wanted to clarify my understanding for the member of Hamilton. I don't think, the park is already open, is my understanding. So we're not talking about a delay in the project. We're talking about the final transfer of a parcel of land from the Wynne Liberals for the low price of $100 million. But on the subject of ecological integrity, I just want to have the government be on record on 2 points that I'm concerned about. Ecological integrity sounds like a planet-friendly word, but my understanding is that if fire or flood would break out in the park, that the government will intervene, which is not what's typically understood in ecological integrity, and also that farmers will continue to be able to farm as they are farming now, which is not also guaranteed by that term. So I just would love to have the government put that on record. Thank you.
The honourable member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my friend for her intervention. With respect to the issue of ecological integrity, it is front and center, and I re-emphasize it in my speech. All national parks in Canada have, the Parks Canada has a mandate to ensure ecological integrity as front and center of its management plan. There's no difference here. The only difference is that we are talking about an area that is somewhat developed around. I live very close to the park. I know there's a hospital, there's a highway going through it, there are railway lines, there's a number of different communities that surround it. And it's very, very similar, I think, to Banff National Park, where there is an element of development there. What is important is that when we look at the future, environmental ecological integrity is front and center, which means that yes, if there is a fire, they will have to, we will have to send a fire department to put out the fire, as your colleague from Barrie Innisfil said earlier. Those are things that are part of the reality of the area that we're talking about. We're talking about one of the, from a real estate dollar perspective, is one of the highest, areas in the country. So it will definitely do those things, but at the same time, have ecological integrity as front and center.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Jonquière.
The honourable member for Jonquière. Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his speech. I have the Fjord du Saguenay National Park in my riding. It's kilometres and kilometres that enable us to see the fjord, the area. Winter sports are practiced there, summer sports, etc. So that's very important. And they have, in fact, applied for UNESCO recognition. And that will bring in a considerable influx of tourists to the area with a designation. So I hope we'll get some good news on that for that recognition. My question to the member opposite is, will they honor their commitment? Now we're talking about the Rouge National Park, but it's also important for the ecology, for the forest, for the wetlands, to have very strict and concrete measures in place to protect them.
Park.
I thank my friend for that question, and certainly congratulate her on hopefully achieving the UNESCO designation as a World Heritage Site. But with respect to the Rouge, I mean, it's pretty clear that ecological integrity is essential, and that's what this bill envisions, and this is a commitment that we made, and it's a commitment that we're delivering on, Madam Speaker.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Scarborough, for Peace River West Lock.
That's it, Madam Speaker. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate this bill because it gives me another opportunity to speak about my riding and, as I like to call it, the promised land. And so I was just wondering from the honourable member, seeing as he seems to have had quite a hand in drafting this bill, I was just wondering on the process of what they went through in order to develop taking the little piece out of the national park up in northern Alberta and handing it over to the local First Nation. I'm just wondering if you can outline a little bit of the process that went into that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
I'd like to thank my friend for those comments and question. Certainly, Promised Land goes way beyond just northern Alberta. I think it goes from coast to coast to coast in the country that we live in. But certainly, we have more promised lands in our ridings, perhaps, than others. In terms of, my advocacy has been limited to the Rouge Park, and admittedly because of the area I represent and my particular interest in ensuring that this becomes a Canada 150 outcome for us. With respect to the amendments that will affect my friend's riding in Peace River Westlaw, it really is an issue of reconciliation, is to ensure that we transfer over lands that will enhance the First Nations community in his riding and certainly to support the overall process of doing justice by our Indigenous peoples.
And comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And if I may, just to commend the member from Scarborough Rouge Park for the fantastic work that he has been in terms of that advocate. I couldn't help but notice, whether it was in second reading, committee stage, third reading, the members' engagement on this particular piece of legislation. It's quite obvious that he's very passionate about not only the bill, but more specifically the park itself. So I just wanted to congratulate him on doing such a fantastic job in being a strong advocate. And when I think of our national parks, I made reference to it earlier, there is a great sense of pride in our national parks and historical sites. And maybe if I could just ask the member if he could provide some thoughts in terms of how it is that our parks and historical sites is a part of our heritage. And we should go out and promote and encourage the public to get engaged in our parks. Whether it's an urban park, rural park, all parks are good parks.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank my friend for those kind words and those comments. The Rouge Park is very personal to the people who live in the community, who live around the park, and to the people of Scarborough. Many of us have spent our great moments there. We've, my daughters, for example, have planted trees. Last fall during Thanksgiving, we were out for a hike. I know my friend from Guildwood said the same thing about his family during Thanksgiving. So it's a very personal thing. It's not something, it's not many people can't say we had a role in shaping our national park or a national park. And I think a lot of kids who live in my riding, but also around Scarborough can say that. So it's very personal, and I think that maybe that impact may be coming out in the way we're presenting the need for this legislation, but it does really animate the great deal of pride in all of us, because not just as a representative of Scarborough Rouge Park, but all of us as colleagues here who are looking at Canada's 150 and saying, what a gift to Canada that we can give on its 150th birthday.
Comments, questions et commentaires. We have time for a brief question. The Honourable Member for Peace River Westlock.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and once again I'd like to thank the interventions of my colleague from Rouge Park. Him and I have met on several occasions. We sit on committee together, but then we also seem to run into each other at events. So we seem to have a lot of similar interests around the world, and it's just interesting that we both end up on a similar bill. Parts of our ridings, even though we're vast 3,000 kilometers between our ridings, we seem to be on the same thing more often. So my question to the honourable colleague is how come this little piece of the bill never ended up in the name of the bill? Thank you.
The honourable member for Scarborough Rouge Park, a very brief answer, please.
thank my friend for that, and yes, we do end up spending a lot of time together on our committee work. Look, what's important is the content of the bill, and the content of the bill in C-18 covers a range of issues, including what's relevant in my writing, which is to ensure ecological integrity and amendments to the Rouge National Park Act, as well as important initiatives that will ensure that we're towards a path of reconciliation in my friend's writing of Peace River Westlaw. And I think that's what's important. I don't think titles are essential. I think what's important is the outcome, and I think we have the desired outcome that we want. And as Canadians and as parliamentarians, sitting on this 150th birthday year, this is a great way to celebrate our progress.